Hi, I want to make a video on I guess would be a psychology kind of subject, and I want to discuss how we overinflate the importance and how we view other people's opinions and how they perceive ourselves and how we perceive others, and how sometimes we can overinflate the importance of, say, someone's significance, and how we almost put our standards of reality on someone, say some individual or some concept or some idea that we have, and how we can let that get in the way and have us think we're doing more when we see the shine their eyes shine when we do something that they may expect. How we've changed the world, we've made a reaction out of someone that we feel like we've made, that was important to a person. You find um, that that person reacts to you, and that reaction that you get out of a person, and how that's not as significant as you may think it is, when that person is no different than you, just a simple projection, just another part of this, interaction that we're a part of. We're a part of an interaction, and there's nothing more to this than a projection. There's no real you inside of you. There's just a projection, and you realize that the thoughts you have, while they can go in all sorts of directions, they're a very simplistic process. It's a mechanical process that's happening, and that's the thing that's controlling you, is a mechanical process. The mechanical process that's controlling you is very, very rigid, very linear. It's a very linear process that's controlling the way you think and the way you, um, every single process is happening. Even if you're, say thinking of some kind of delusion, like I've mentioned before, it doesn't matter. It's a process that led from some kind of mechanical process, leading you to have a certain belief and think something a certain way. And that's exactly the way it's working. Regardless of what you may think, it happens a certain way because of a certain mechanical process inside of your thought processes and the things that cause your thought processes. And the subject I wanted to mostly tackle in this is how you feel like you're making a change on this world. And I think this is probably more of a psychology video, and that I'm just going over right now. And the idea is this perception that you see someone react to, say, something that you feel like you've made a difference. Very vague concept, I suppose I would say. More along the lines of a vague concepts. And the idea is this, where you feel like you see the glisten in a person's eye when you feel like you've made a change, and you see that and you react to it like it means something. You made a difference. You say you do something and you made a difference. You see that person react in a certain way. You make your associations. Okay, they're reacting a certain way. I know I've made a difference. I made the national news. I did something, right? I did something. I made a difference, and I could see the reaction. I could see how my effect has been taken on this has taken effect on this world, this existence, the way everything's interacting now. I know it's making a huge difference. It's making a direct difference, not just by way of butterfly effect making a difference. It's not something that's just by way of making a difference. It's actually making a direct difference as opposed to an indirect difference. It's something that people are consciously aware of, as opposed to just interacting based on a whole string of interactions that they don't even know where the initial um, thing that may have caused a certain set of actions came from. Say you flicked a pencil, and all of a sudden that means that that person's going to react a certain way. You touch something, that means it's going to react a certain way. We're talking about a difference that we can consciously recognize, as opposed to my unconscious, which you could say is the unconscious. Could be the same, akin to along the lines of me pressing something and you don't realize what that you just press a simple button. You press, yeah, I touch my hand like this, and all of a sudden that means it's going to have a long lasting butterfly effect, a butterfly landing on a tree. It's going to have that kind of effect, where it's sort of like an unconscious thought process, where and where it has an effect on something, and we don't necessarily know the effect, because the effect that it has, even though it's part of the mechanism, along that lines of the mechanism, we don't really know what the butterfly effect is. It's a simple interaction leading to a conclusion that may be grandiose. It may lead to one of those conscious, grandiose, conscious decisions, or conscious um, interactions, one of those significant interactions that we would say is conscious, where we know we're aware of the significance of it, as opposed to, say, me touching myself on the hand and all of a sudden that leading to something, even though it is part of the whole process, leading up to something, to an end based on an initial. There's these interactions, whatever it may be, unless you close it off, and you do you basically close it off, and you forget about the initial beginning, initial end, and you say, this is what caused this. I pushed my hand, and that caused my hand, the skin in my hand, to move back. But even though I know what caused my hand to move, and all these things that led up to it, me saying it, me bringing up the example, obviously those things are the things that caused it beforehand, but we're closing off the example group, and then I'm giving it a specific example of a beginning cause, and I'm contriving a beginning, and I'm contriving an effect. I'm contriving a cause, and I'm contriving an effect. And that's exactly what we can do to a certain extent, because we're all part of this chaos mechanism, where we're part of this interaction, but there's no beginning or end that we can necessarily put our fingers on, other than we know that there's a beginning that caused there's an initial cause, and there's going to be some end, and that's going to be the leap that we're in the existence of. We're in midair right now, and there's nothing we could do to change the path or the course that we're taking. We're just going to finish the jump, and that's what's going to happen. Or we're going to finish going around in a circle, and we're going to finish that process. The redundant process would be more akin to life, is going through the redundant process, or just going through a jump in the momentum, or going the momentum of spinning around in the air and just landing and not knowing where you're going to land, because you're just going through the motions when you're just letting gravity control you. The process from the initial process to the end, the landing and the jumping off point, leading to the landing. Back to the main topic I wanted to mention in this video. And the main topic I wanted to mention in this video is, like I mentioned before, it's more psychology, I would say, along the lines, but it is a phenomenon that I think has a certain specific effect on people, and I know people have it, at least to a certain extent, have had this feeling or this perception, and this perception is that you're making an effect, even though you see your interaction, you see the effect in other people's eyes. You say, that person's interacting the way I did, and you put more significance behind a person's interactions or a person's reactions to a certain circumstance that you may have had a direct cause on. And the direct cause may be as simple as you making a difference, you making a speech, or whatever it may be, whatever significance thing that you may have had made a difference on. You see it in a person's eyes, you see the interaction, you see the effect that it's led to, and you put more significance behind that person's interaction or that person's reaction, even though they're just a simple projection like you. There's nothing more going on than you. You put more significance behind it because it's not you, and that's by natural means the thing that you first come to, because that's you put more, generally speaking, I suppose, you put more significance behind other people's reactions than yours, because you're living your reactions more sort of like you live your like you don't see yourself improve as much because you're gradually living in your own shoes, and you see a gradual increase, even though you don't see the biggest increase over time. Say you're increasing your skill at something, and that's the case. You're living in your shoes, and you may not necessarily see the significant change that you've made, and other people will notice it more because they see you every once in a while, and they see the difference in jumps and leaps as opposed to small steps. And we put more significance behind other people's reactions, and we feel that means more. You see the person's reaction, you see a person's face, and you see the reaction to, say, even if they don't necessarily mention, say, some effect that you may have had, you can see the effect. You can almost project the effect onto someone else. And that's where the psychology comes in, onto a person's. You can project it onto their visage, to their appearance, to their face, to the reaction, and you can project how you may feel or see it, how they may see it, and put it in your own eyes through you putting your own projection onto them. And like I've mentioned this before, putting projections, and this is the same basic idea as putting your projections onto other people's opinions. And you project it, and they say something, you make that association in your head, and all of a sudden they think exactly what you think, because you're projecting your exact opinion onto someone else. even though they don't necessarily think that. Um, and they don't necessarily have to say anything. They just have to have one little association that rings a bell in your head, and all of a sudden it leads to a cause and effect interaction that leads you to believe something, that they think exactly what you're thinking, negative or positive, whatever it may be. So the basic idea is that you see more significance, you see more of a, you see more fate in, say, something like this, if that makes any sense. You see more significance in a person's eyes or an interaction that you see. You say you do something, you know it had an effect on someone, you know someone's seen it, or you know someone's reacted to it, you know someone's interacted with what you've done, and they've seen it or interacted or sensed it in whatever way possible, and you see that interaction in that person's eyes or face, or even just an interaction at looking at a wall after you've busted it with a sledgehammer or something. You can see it, and then you can see a person's reaction. You can see, you put more significance behind that, like what you did has more meaning than it actually does, even though, because you're looking at through the other person's eyes, like there's some kind of mysterious, vague veil over a person's psyche, something beyond your understanding, even though the understanding is nothing beyond the same projection that you're experiencing yourself. So the projection that you see in someone else, you're projecting your projection onto them, but you're also putting this veil over it. You know, you're putting your projection on them like it means something in their eyes, and putting almost words in their mouth, even though that's not necessarily what they think. You're putting your projection and putting it in their projection, and then yet you're putting a veil over it like it means something more than it actually means. So say you've made you performed well at a political speech, say for example, and you see a person reacting. You made a big difference. Something significant is going to happen, and they're going to report it after they've seen it. You see the effect it has on them, and it doesn't necessarily mean anything. The effect that you see in a person's reaction is no more than the effect that you would have. So they're just another piece in this interaction, like you, like me, like anyone else in this reality. We're living as a part of a chaotic mechanism of reaction and interaction. Even though it's predetermined, doesn't mean there's not interaction. We're still living out the course of the interaction, regardless of the fact that it's predetermined. So therefore, we don't necessarily know what's going to happen, and yet we are the pieces that need to make the difference for the outcome that we say we want, or what we may prophesize. We're still part of that interaction, and therefore we are the ones that have to make the difference. It's not just going to happen on its own. It's something that has to happen because of us, because we're the pieces in the mechanism that will lead to the end, that leads to an interaction that happens a certain way. And wishing, or whatever it may be, has an effect like anything else, but obviously the effect's going to have a certain outcome based on certain circumstances, and that's a difference between psychology and what you expect and the real reality of what's really going to happen. It could make a difference. It's going to happen one thing or another. One thing's going to happen one way or another, and it doesn't matter necessarily what you think. Initiative has to take place, and that's based on the interaction of the pieces in the puzzle, like you and me, like pieces in the puzzle, pieces in the mechanism. It's going to have to be caused by something, and that goes back to the initial point. They're like pieces in any other, and this is a psychology video mostly, and putting different points of philosophy in there as well. But yes, when you see the interaction, you see you've made a difference. You look at someone else like it means something more, like you've made a more impact on something more hard, like the bedrock of reality you see in other people. Even though that's the case, you have to realize it's the same thing as you. But that projection is, even though we don't see it, we see more significance in someone else, and that's more, I would say, supposedly a psychological phenomenon, where we're seeing more significance in, say, what someone else thinks, as if their opinion or their reaction means more than, say, my reaction. Even though I may have an ego or whatever it is, I see more veil of mystery, more concrete reality. I see them more as a part of a reaction and the background of reality, as opposed to myself, as I feel like I'm a main character in, say, the existence. I see more as if I'm changing something in the background. I'm changing something that's just part of the mechanism. When I see this reaction that I may have made, even though the reaction is no different than yours, even though it is different because you're not living necessarily in their shoes, but it's best to be empathetic and look in their shoes. It's, to a certain extent, it's good to look into other people's shoes, or put yourself in other people's shoes, because otherwise things aren't going to change. And it's about mitigating against and deterring against future harm and destruction. against sentient beings, and that's exactly what we're doing. And that's another distinction you have to make, is that the philosophy that we're implying and or imparting on this reality, that we're taking part in this reality, is to make the sentient being more, make the sentience more livable. We're trying to make existence more comfortable with the sentience, and that's a difference between philosophy. They're making the distinction between the science of reality and the philosophy, and trying to make our lives easier. And philosophy has a lot to do with just the interactions of value, and that value is created by us. And that's the distinction: the value created by us, and the philosophy and the science, the hard science, created by the reality around us, regardless of our existence. So the science exists regardless of our existence, but the value and distinctions of, say, philosophy is based on our existence. And that's a distinction. The philosophy is based mostly on our existence, and the science is mostly based on the hard facts of reality regardless of our existence. And that's another distinction we made between reality and the science or the philosophy that we're putting on, imparting, or that we're taking part of in this reality. I'm grasping for words right now. So we're viewing ourselves and looking at more into the background, like we're changing a background. When we see someone else's reaction, put more significance in that reaction. Say we make a difference and we see someone's reaction. We see more significance in that reaction than we see ourselves, because we're living in our shoes, and we view another person, say, as a background of reality that we're living in. We view their opinion more as a part of reality as opposed to ours, as I'm living in reality, but I'm not part of reality. And the other person's a part of this reality, and I'm just I'm on the outside looking in at the reactions of this reality, or looking on the outside, and I'm just a piece. I'm whatever distinction you can make between yourself and other people, and make other people's significance mean more based on the fact that you think that they have more significance because they're part of this reality more than, say, you are, and you're making a difference because they're just a background in this reality, and you're changing reality as a whole, like a wall that you, say, beat in with a sledgehammer. You see their reaction to something they say that you did, significant, bad, good, whatever it may be, is more significant, and it means more, even though it's just a projection, simple projection, just like you. There's nothing more than cause and effect interaction, that we're experiencing a force feedback mechanism in which we're interacting with the environment. And there's nothing more than that, a projection. There's not much going inside your head other than weird sensations, a force feedback mechanism between your psychology and your physiology that creates your psychology. There's the physiology, and it's a force feedback mechanism between the outside, the inside, creating the psychology reaction, a force feedback mechanism between your psychology and in your psychology, interacting with the environment outside of you, inside of you, leading to this force feedback mechanism, leading to this illusion of something more than what it really is. These feelings that we have, these thoughts that we have, are just a mechanical process of this interaction of psychology based on physiology interacting with the outside physiology, or outside mechanical reality, physical mechanical reality. And that's exactly the mechanism that we're working off of. Feelings are just feelings based on physiology interacting with our awareness. This awareness is what really the psychology is, as opposed to these feelings that we feel, because the feelings mean nothing without this awareness, the psychology of projection and force feedback. Because there's some things that can feel, but they don't necessarily feel to the same extent as we are, because they don't have to the same extent the force feedback mechanism that we have. But that's obviously up for debate to certain extents, depending on the species of animal and the sentient being. So I hope that made sense, and this video is long enough anyway. But the basic idea is, we do something, we feel like we've made a difference, we see the glisten in someone else's eye, and the difference that we made, even though the difference that we made is and the difference that someone else makes is just part of this mechanism of interaction, chaotic mechanism. You didn't really cause it. Someone else caused it just as much as you. It's the whole mechanism as a whole that caused it more than any piece in the mechanism, because the pieces are just interacting based on an initial cause and a leading to an end effect. And these interactions as a whole is taken as a whole. It's the whole that matters, and that's the whole output in the end, either how negative the output in the end of sentient sensation, a sentient experience. It's going to be how much do we mitigate against the possible negative it could be out at the end. As a whole is what matters most. And it doesn't matter what causes it, or whatever it may be. It doesn't matter what causes it. There's either more pain or less pain. It doesn't matter what causes it. Doesn't matter whatever projection you may feel like you're experiencing more suffering. It's a matter of suffering as a whole, because this mechanism works as a whole. All sentient beings based on this reality, and that's where this philosophy comes in, the value based on the sentient experience, making our sentient experience better, and that's what we're experiencing. And there's nothing more to the sentient experience. We view reality as more. There's nothing more to this reality than, say, you're going to have more satisfying way to find the way to eat your meal. And that's really the only extent we can change this reality. There's nothing more outside this reality than I'm going to eat, but I'm not going to eat. Really, it's all just about satisfying this. But that's another video I want to make anyway. It's about satisfying this thing, and it's the simple way that this reality is working, and it's not working in any other way than that. So I think that's all I want to say. Just simple interaction. There's nothing we can do, and it's taken as a whole that matters most, and that's what matters in the end, is the end outcome of all the sentient beings. And like I said before, it doesn't matter what causes it, and it's just a simple projection of force feedback mechanism, and the significance you see in someone else's reaction or appearance or whatever it may be. It doesn't mean anything beyond the same initial cause, but the initial cause, but the thing, then it doesn't mean anything than, say, you yourself reacting in the same exact way to someone else and viewing you. And the only thing creating that distinction, creating that other reality, is the reality that it's a psychological phenomenon that exists, and it's something that can be changed. And recognizing more of reality and more of the reality, then we're letting the psychology take over the reality and have that perception take us and try to manipulate us against, say, seeing the truth more obviously. So I think that's good enough. I don't want to be too redundant. But anyway, if I have anything else to say, I'll add it in another video. And that's all I need to say. Sorry. The video went on too long anyway. So thank you, and until next time, bye.